You unlock this history book with the key of knowledge. Beyond is another dimension, a dimension where calmness' very tea is liberty, a dimension where Camelot wasn't just a place to park your camels, and a dimension where everyone's favorite dance is independence. You're moving into the pages of both fact and evidence. You just crossed over into the historic zone. Tonight's episode is Return of the Watts Rebellion, Race Wars during Days of Present Past. Narrated, created, directed, and written by Abel Guillen. Hello there. What if I told you something so small, no bigger than a shoebox, caused one of the biggest riots called the Watts Riots in the city of Los Angeles, which led 4,000 members of the National Guard to come to calm down the riots and also caused around an estimated of 50 through 100 million American dollars in property damage? Will you believe me if I told you a few pieces of paper holding something called Proposition 14 caused all this mayhem? So you're wondering, what is Proposition 14? So, Proposition 14 was able to let landlords and property owners to decide who they want to rent their property to, which meant that they were able to discriminate anyone who came to rent their property. The proposition is as follows. Neither the state nor any subdivision or agency therefore shall deny, limit, or abridge directly nor indirectly the right of any person who is willingly or desires to sell, lease, or rent any part of or all of his real property, to decline to sell, lend, or rent such property to such a person or person as he, in his absolute discretion, chooses. Yeehaw! In the year 1964, many great things happened, such as the passing of the Civil Rights Act that made people of color Americans to have the same rights as anyone else in this great land of ours. Whenever there is light, there shall always be darkness. Sadly, that was the same year that Proposition 14 passed and nullified the Rumford Fair Housing Act, which was an act by the California legislature created by William Bryan Rumford in the year 1963. This act tried to end racial discrimination by the property owners who refused to rent or sell their property to people of color. After Proposition 14, it made it harder for Hispanics and African Americans to get a house in California. Proposition 14 was merely the match of how the Watts riots started. However, many African Americans were angry, especially the 500,000 African Americans who migrated to the West Coast after World War II, because they all hoped to leave the racism and discrimination from the East. Sadly, that did not happen. Trust me, don't make them angry. You won't like them when they're angry. Ah! Riot, smash, puny racism! We'll get to that point later. So, the thing that ignited everyone and wants to riot happened during at the time where Los Angeles had several incidents with racial discrimination caused by their own police officers, which was the year 1965. Many African American residents were left out from high-paying jobs, affordable housing, and politics. In general, the African American community were at the brink of exploding by the amount of discrimination in their lives. It all ignited on August 11, 1965. A 21-year-old African-American named Margaret Fry was arrested for drunk driving in the night. This arrest was made by two white male police officers and 2 blocks away from Fry's home. Several residents near the area and Fry's mother and brother saw the arrest. One of the police officers were scared that the individuals would cause a riot, so he pulled out his gun to try to scare them. However, Fry's mom came at the police officer from the back and ripped the officer's shirt. Then she was later arrested with both her sons. During the night, the crowd of people near the arrest began to grow. The police tried to break up the crowd several times, but they were attacked with rocks and chunks of concrete. After this event, rumors were flying by throughout the African American community. The majority of them thought that this whole thing was racial discrimination by the police officers. This led many local black community leaders to meet and discuss an action plan and to keep everyone calm on August 12, 1965, the day after the Frys were arrested. Sadly, the meetup failed, which led the people who wanted to throw stones at cars and beat up white people who entered the area, and caused several fires and looting in Watts. This made the Los Angeles Police Chief, William H. Parker, to say that the people rioting, that they are monkeys in the zoo. You might say they were bananas for equality. He also called for the help of the California Army National Guard. On Friday, August 13, around 2,300 National Guardsmen arrived to help out the police in order to maintain the order. One of the sergeants of the National Guard said, and I quote, "The streets of Watts resembled an all-out war in some far-off foreign country. It bore no resemblance to the United States of America." That same Friday was one of the most tense days of the entire riots. The rioting in Watts was just out of control. This led 16,000 law enforcement personnel to patrol the whole city by nightfall. There was even blockades and warning signs around Watts of how deadly it was. And there was even this one sign that had "Turn left or get shot" written on it. People who were participating in the riots didn't really help their cause that much. They mostly started physical fights with the police, blocked firefighters from entering Watts, beat up white motorists, and looted a bunch of white-owned stores. In order to stop the riots any further, Chief Parker made a mass arrest. Following the National Guardsmen, a curfew was declared for the majority of South Central Los Angeles at 8 o'clock p.m. Anyone who was out on curfew would be arrested. On the morning of Sunday, August 15, the riots ended with between 31,000 to 35,000 adults participating in the riots, while around 70,000 people who thought what the police did was wrong, but did not participate. When the riots ended, no one truly won anything. During the riots, 34 people died. Of those, 31 people were killed by law enforcement bullets. Also, 1,032 were injured, and about 4,000 people were arrested. Also, about $50 to $100 million worth of property destroyed, with 977 buildings either destroyed, damaged, burned, or looted. After the riots ended, it left a big impact into society. Debates came in of what really happened in Watts. Watts was later known to the whole country to be under a great deal of racial and social tension. 2 days after the riot, the Lord himself, Martin Luther King Jr., spoke on California, even though the California governor, Edmund Brown, didn't want him to come. King still came because he wanted to support those living in the ghetto, because he thought those individuals would be pushed further into despair and helplessness by the right, and wanted both African Americans and whites to favor the new civil rights reform. In other words, Watts' rebellion truly changed the frontier of racial discrimination in California. This inspired the Detroit riots, the Newmark riots, and other types of violence during 1967. The riots might have ended on August 15, 1965, but it truly resolved when Proposition 14 was declared unconstitutional by the California Supreme Court, which reinstated the Rumford Fair Housing Act in the Rittman v. Mulkey case, which was a decision affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1966. Everything so far in the late 60s looked good for the African Americans and the end of racial discrimination. What if I told you that everything that has happened in Watts towards the end of racial discrimination is still alive and getting stronger by the day? Will you believe me?
Knock the crap out of him, would you? Seriously. Get him out of here. In the good old days, this doesn't happen because they used to treat them very, very rough. And when they protested once, they would not do it again so easily. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you. I love the old days. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. That's true.
The reason I talk about this whole event that happened in Watts is so people can remember the consequences of something so insignificantly small that caused the beginning of death and destruction in America. Maybe the proposition didn't exist, or maybe if the cops weren't irresponsible by discriminating African Americans, 34 of those dead people in Watts could be alive to this day. Such as George Santiment said once, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it."